side, and then Giroux back in. They score! In front here, Simmons. He scores! Wayne Simmons. Voracek catches up to it, cuts to the middle of the shot. He scores!
This is the Hockey Happy Hour with Ciancutti and Rob the Povia.
Drowning deep in my sea of lonely, broken, your servant I am. Will you give it to me? It seems what's left of my human side is slowly changing in me. Will you give it to me? Looking at my own reflection.
And we welcome you, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Hockey Happy Hour. And it's hard to believe we are on our 17th episode, I believe.
Woohoo!
Yeah. As anybody who doesn't know, for the 17th time, it is Matt Ciancutti behind the boards. And as always, can't do the show without him. The best co-host a man could ever ask for, Rob the Povia, right in front of me, actually. What's going on, Rob?
Oh, man, I'm all disturbed right now. No. No, I'm actually quite happy with the way things are going in the NHL playoffs. Ready to talk playoffs, ready to eat shit and breathe playoffs.
Yeah, that's right. The playoff action is starting to get into high gear. We are getting ready for the conference finals. We have come this far. We are almost through the semifinals. We'll get into that in a bit. But we're almost at the very end. The Stanley Cup is almost within grasp of 3 teams so far. There'll be 1 team eliminated tonight, and then it'll be down to 4. Our final 4 of the NHL this year.
It's gone by so fast, man.
Yeah, it does, man. It almost seems like yesterday. We were midway through the beginning of the season when we started this show, and now we're about ready to close out our first season in the Hockey Happy Hour. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Really.
I mean, time flies when you're having fun and preaching hockey to the masses.
It is, and the funny part is that it was almost last week we were talking about how Giroux's got to get started in scoring, and now we're talking about the long road trip, and the next thing you know, we're talking about how the Flyers are doing well, winding down the season, and then next thing you know, we bring Henry in, and now we were into the playoffs, the Flyers got eliminated, and then we went through the semifinals, and now we're here. It's unbelievable.
Well, the playoffs have been so entertaining this year. I don't know if it's from doing this show that's kept me so invested in it, but I don't think so. I think there's just been great matchups, teams coming out of the woodwork that you wouldn't have expected, and mighty giants falling.
Certainly. And speaking of giants falling, let's get into the very first topic that we've got on hand for the Hockey Happy Hour right here today, and that is the Pittsburgh Penguins. Obviously, anybody who's anybody knows that Pittsburgh, they should have played better in that series against Columbus, and then they go up against the Rangers in the semifinals, and they started out okay. The Rangers got the first win, but then Pittsburgh just unloaded on them. They took a 3-1 lead, and somehow, some way, Pittsburgh let a 3-1 stranglehold slip right through their fingers and got eliminated in Game 7.
Yeah, they're a true Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde team. I mean, they come out that first game, Rangers get that first win, and I'm like, well, this is what I expected. Columbus really showed their weaknesses, and it wasn't just a Flyers-Pittsburgh matchup that caused it. It was obviously a way teams have gotten to know how to throw these boys off their game. Rangers repeated that same formula in Game 1, were successful, and then Pittsburgh just unloaded on King Henrik and the New York Rangers. And I'm like, wow, I did not expect that to happen up 3-1. I'm like, I guess Pittsburgh's moving on to, I had them earmarked right there. But then, speaking of King Lundqvist, man, he just took a stranglehold on this series. Absolutely. And stole, virtually every game, specifically Game 7.
Yeah, Game 7 was a strange game. It was all Rangers at the beginning, and then the Penguins slowly started to get it their way. Unfortunately, it was too little too late for the Penguins. Same thing happened to the Flyers. They had Game 7 was all Rangers at the beginning, and then the Flyers slowly started to get back into it. By the time they were playing their game, it was way too late for them to make any kind of comeback. Same thing with Pittsburgh. They, too, found themselves in the doghouse, and they couldn't get out of it, and it just shocks me that it doesn't shock me. It more like it makes me laugh to see a team like Pittsburgh that has been so-called the supposed to be new dynasty in hockey and supposed to be the best team in the NHL, has the superstar of the NHL on their team, yet they only have one Stanley Cup to their name, and then at the same time, they barely won that Stanley Cup against Detroit. And then to go along with it, they haven't made it back to the finals since then, and they've struggled to even get out of the first and second and third round anyway, and they haven't been able to get out of the third round since then.
Yeah. I mean, why do you think this is? Why do you think that, was 2009 an aberration? Is this not a solid team that was put collectively together?
I think it's a solid team, and I think it's put very well together. I just think that, I think the coaching is way too overrated. I think Dan Bylsma's coaching I don't think he's that good of a coach. Right. Team USA didn't even medal. I mean, they were fine until they faced a team that was better than them, and then they couldn't handle it.
Right.
Well, then what was the problem? There was no fight, there was no fire, there was no desire against Finland, and they got their asses whipped and straight out of the tournament. And then the same thing going for the Penguins. The Penguins run into a team that's either as good as them or better than them and are outplaying them, and they can't handle it. And they start to capsize. It's almost like this team is a bully team. It can only face teams that they can bully and they can beat.
Right.
They can't face a team that they can't bully. And it went perfect. A perfect example is Boston.
Right.
Last year in the Eastern Conference Finals, Pittsburgh went all through the playoffs. They got through New York, and that was easy, going through the Islanders. And Ottawa, they got through Ottawa easy. I mean, Ottawa tried as best they could, but Ottawa and the Islanders, they were just not up to par with the Penguins.
They're not going to match their talent level.
They're not going to match the talent level. They could try with the heart and the spirit, but it's not going to be enough to get through Pittsburgh.
Right.
But Boston had them matched in every category, and Pittsburgh couldn't handle it.
Right.
And Pittsburgh couldn't bully them. Pittsburgh couldn't intimidate them with their speed and offense. So what happened? They got swept. They got swept right out of the playoffs by Boston, and that's what happens when you find yourself with a team like that. It went to show. Like, they couldn't beat the Flyers. They can't bully the Flyers.
Yeah.
The Flyers aren't intimidated by Pittsburgh at all. Flyers beat them because of it.
Yep.
And the same thing happened. Columbus, they might have capsized on it. Columbus showed a lot of fight and a lot of heart. I think Columbus's youth came back to haunt them. They got a little rattled. They got a little rattled in the latter part of the series, especially Bobrovsky, because I think the nerves got to them eventually.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of pressure to go up against a team like Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah.
It's still very hard to beat them. And then they face the Rangers, and the Rangers are intimidated by them at all. The Rangers would have done the exact same thing the Flyers would have done, spat right in their face to say, we're not intimidated by you. It's as simple as that. You take Crosby and shove him up your you-know-what, we're not intimidated, you know?
And leave it to the Rangers for doing it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely, handled this series in the right manner and really exposed, just to, corroborate with your assessment on Pittsburgh, the team just lacks discipline.
It does.
From top to bottom. And I thought there was a big difference between them and Washington, and now I kind of hold them both in the same light. It's not a well-constructed team. They really need to revamp that team. Hold on to your superstars, of course. But, I mean, they leave too much for the last get-go. I mean, they get down 2-1 on the Rangers midway in the second period and then just start putting a barrage of shots against Lundqvist, and he just rose to the occasion. And, Pittsburgh did not.
One thing about Lundqvist is that he's always been one of those really good goaltenders. I'm not going to say he's great, because I've seen Lundqvist let in some flukes here and there, and he's had his bad games. Let's not jump to conclusions and say he's Martin Brodeur-like, because he's not. I mean, Brodeur was in another universe. He's not there. I mean, I don't think there's any goalie in the NHL right now that is on Brodeur's level, in all honesty. Lundqvist is close. I'm not saying he's too far off, but he's not there.
When it comes
close.
to Game 7s,
when it comes to Game 7s, he's close. I'm not gonna say he's not close. But Lundqvist, he rose to the occasion again. And albeit, I just think Lundqvist, if he's tested enough, he's really good. If he's not tested, that's when he starts to really look uncomfortable.
Right.
And I think that goes to show when the Flyers were not putting as many shots down on him, the Flyers were scoring on him. And the same thing with Pittsburgh. When Pittsburgh wasn't throwing many shots down on him, they were scoring on him because I think he wasn't used to working. It's just like, I think it's more, he gets better if he gets to that 30-plus mark when he's facing shots. He just seems to get better the more he flexes the pads, the more he gets better with that. Some goalies, it's the opposite. The less they work, the better it is for them. I think it's actually the opposite effect on Lundqvist. I think he gets better as the game goes along, which is horrible news if he got to face the Rangers and he got to put more than 20 shots down on him. But the point is that also the block shots have to be brought into this, that the block shots have been that's one thing I'll give the Rangers a lot of credit for. They are not afraid to take one for the team. They took so many block shots in both series they've been through so far. So many shots stopped right before they even got to Lundqvist.
Yeah.
So a lot of credit given there to that Rangers team doing that. And then at the same time, like I said before, I still say Lundqvist is the guy who, if he doesn't get challenged a lot, he's going to mess up. It's as simple as that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, besides the post, of course.
Yeah.
Defensemen blocking shots are the goalie's true best friend.
Yeah.
It's less. I mean, as long as you're not providing, you're not screening your own goaltender during this process, and Rangers have been fantastic at doing that. I mean, in both series, and I mean, hats off to them, man. I mean, and hats off to Lundqvist as well. As the series wears on, he gets better. And his record in Game 7s is remarkable. And this is now the first time that the New York Rangers have come back from 3-1 to come back and win a series in 7. It's been a true accomplishment for the New York Rangers.
It has been. And now that the Rangers have made a pretty big piece of history, coming back down 3-1. Same thing with the Kings coming back down 3-0.
Right.
It's crazy to see what's happened in the playoffs. It's just like, doesn't matter who gets that 3-1, 3-0 lead. It's not safe anymore,
right. It never used to be like that in old-time hockey. And now look how, I mean, you've had two teams now come back from 3-0 in the past 4 seasons. In comparison to only two other teams have done it, since the history of hockey. So, and that was, I believe, in 1940.
Not 1940. I don't think it was. It was. Oh yeah, it was
42, I believe.
42. Toronto did it, and they won the Stanley Cup because of it. And then the same thing with New York beating Pittsburgh in 74.
Right.
So that's a wide gap between 42 and 74.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. World War II was still going on the first time it happened. And then in 74, the Vietnam War was going on during that period of time. So crazy stuff there in that history. And then you go through the 80s, never happened. 90s didn't happen. And then finally, you get to 2010, the Flyers do it. And then, was it only 5 years later? I think it would be. No, 4 years later, I do believe. 2014, the Kings do it. So it's just like, man.
No lead is safe.
Like you cannot be safe anymore with that 3-0 or 3-1 lead. It's just not safe anymore. It's crazy.
I mean, it's unbelievable. It's great for hockey, seeing that your team's never truly out of it. So it's a great thing there. But what was I going to say? In regards to, let's not ignore that as much as the Rangers won this series, Pittsburgh lost this series, and a lot of work has to be done there. I want to believe that us throwing the Rangers in the danger zone inspired them to win and come back from it. And that's assuming any of them have any time to listen to this show. But
I'm not very positive on that one.
Well, just like when you throw on your team's jersey watching the game, it's a superstition. We definitely, any team we throw in the danger zone, you're more than likely to come back and win your series.
And the truth is, it's like caging an animal. You corner that animal, and that animal's going to come out clawing at your ass, basically, to try and get out of that corner because it's got nothing left to do.
In all seriousness, a big shift in this series happened when Martin St. Louis' mom passed away, sadly. Yeah. And his teammates just truly rallied around this man, a man that was new to the team, in the trade this year. And it became their war cry that, let's win this for Mrs. St. Louis. And just, you could just tell, you could see that shift of just inspired hockey that came from it. Not just in Lundqvist and the whole team.
And I think I'll be honest, I'm not a Rangers fan. I don't like the Rangers, but, I'm happy that they got that win when Martin St. Louis passed away. And I'm happy not Martin St. Louis didn't pass away, his mom did. No. But, and it's happy that he scored on that day, because that must have meant the world to him, for him to score that goal on the day or I believe it was the day after his mother passed away.
Divine intervention.
And I think that, that's a beautiful thing to see. It doesn't matter what team it is. It's a beautiful thing to see when, somebody suffers a real tragic, real life event. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing to see that somebody rises to the occasion over it and gets a goal, and it's almost an escape because he puts his head right into the work, and inspired that Rangers team, I think, in a lot of ways to just pick themselves up and say, we're not losing to the Penguins.
Yeah. It's called being a fan of hockey.
Yeah.
Sure, we have our team. Other people have their teams. That's all well and good. It's good for rooting together. It's good for rooting against. But if you're a fan of hockey, how could you not appreciate this?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think that, I can't hate Martin St. Louis at all, not anymore, because of what he's gone through, because I thank God I do not know what he's going through, but I can only imagine, and the horror that must feel. I mean, it's just like you can't hate him for that. He's working hard because I think in his mind he wants to do this for his mom. Yeah. He wants to keep the Rangers breathing into the Stanley Cup final for his mom, you know? And I think the Rangers want to do the same thing. I think the Rangers want to keep themselves breathing for, Martin St. Louis' mom.
And let me be the first one to step up. I was big time insulting Glenn Sather for making this move. I did not like it. St. Louis is an aging guy. You're going to give up a draft pick if you make it, as they have now into the Eastern Conference Finals. I did not like the deal long term. But, man, he must be a soothsayer or something like that, because by making that trade and having this man on your team, he inspired the whole organization, and who knows how far they'll go now.
Let's be honest. I think Martin St. Louis is a franchise-changing trade, in all honesty, because he made that team's offense click.
Yeah.
Rick Nash didn't do it. Brad Richards was okay, but he was having his iffy moments. And without Gabrick, I think he was kind of lost.
Yeah.
And getting St. Louis, who is an old running mate of his with the Lightning, too, I think that just made that team better in that
Not at first.
Not at first. I'll give that. I will say their offense was still pulling that, we don't know where we are bullshit.
Even into the Flyers-Rangers season.
Even into the Flyers-Rangers series. The offense kind of went disappearing for a little while. The Rangers couldn't even score on the Flyers when the Flyers are playing like crap. Right. They can only score 3 goals on them. Like, you guys could score 20, and you guys can't. It's just like, that's bad.
Right.
But this Pittsburgh series, I think they found it. Somewhere out of nowhere, they found that offense, and I think it's all due to Martin St. Louis. I don't think it has anything to do with Rick Nash. I don't think it has anything to do with Brad Richards. And I think it has everything to do with Martin St. Louis. So it goes to show, I think that's the first person that they finally found to fit into Alain Vigneault's system.
Yeah.
Because I still think their system is kind of strange for them.
Yeah.
I will be the first to say that, because they do look odd out there
to
see the Rangers try that system. Because in my honest opinion, the Flyers are able to throw them off, and so were the Penguins. So I'm thinking you're still able to get thrown off your game plan very easy. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, the Flyers and the Penguins are they're not perfect either. It's clear as day that both of them are guilty of getting thrown off their game plan about 1,000 times. Yeah. So, but still, it's just like you guys are still getting thrown off. It seems like you guys are kind of in a mismatch here.
Right.
You guys are used to the rough and tough style. Now you guys are going to, let's be disciplined now for once. You know? Strange, but I think St. Louis is finally starting to say, hey, this actually does work. Let's use it,
Yeah, they're playing to their strengths, ignoring their weaknesses, and that's any system will work in that standpoint. Now, where do the Penguins go from here?
The Penguins, well, obviously from the news, didn't take long to figure out what they were going to do, because apparently Lemieux and co-owner, I forget who the co-owner is with Lemieux, but either way, Lemieux did not waste any time. Ray Shero has been fired.
Yeah, poor Ray.
And
I think he's done a great job. I don't know why you're firing the GM. You really should be firing the coach, but that's what they decided to do.
I'm completely baffled by this decision. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Lemieux's getting a little senile early on. You know, I think, like, you're out of your mind. Yeah. You know, it's just like, I think Dan Bouwsma's the problem. I don't think it's Ray Shero. I think Ray Shero's been able to keep this team's this team is like a locomotive.
Yeah.
It's got to keep moving forward. It can't stop. If it stops, it's screwed.
I nominated him for one of the front office personnel of the year in our awards show, and now you're firing the guy? Look how many injuries this team had during the season and even spilling into the playoffs. And he kept them not only competitive, but far and away the elite team in the Metropolitan, which may not be saying much, but they were one of the 4 top teams in when all was said and
in
done.
the NHL.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
And you know, they were. The only team they bowed to in the East was Boston. That was it.
Yeah.
There's no other team that they could bow to. And meanwhile, in the West, who knows? They were probably competitive against those teams too. Don't know because I didn't watch any of the Penguins games besides the ones they faced with the Flyers and lost.
Right.
But you know, the Penguins firing Ray Shero, this baffles me. This just confuses me to no end. It's like, I don't think Ray Shero did anything wrong. I think he did everything right. And now this also offends me deeply. But you know what? This also makes me happy. You want to know why? Because guess what? The Flyers now need a new assistant GM. So let's get Ray Shero as our assistant GM with Ron Extall. I say it right now to
Beautiful.
Ed Snyder.
Beautiful.
Ed Snyder and Paul Holmgren and Ronnie. Get Ray Shero as our assistant GM, and only good things can come with Hexie and Shero leading the way, in my opinion.
I think if Ed Snyder saw him again, he'd think he was Fred, not Ray, because he's still stuck in the 70s. You know what I mean? But I don't know. So they announced that Dan Bylsma is being retained as head coach, so he's staying.
Still bad move.
And they bumped their assistant GM, Jason Botterill, and now he's the interim GM.
Who?
Yeah, exactly. Botterill if you're spelling at home or even if you're alone. But he's named the intern GM for now. Let's see if they retain him or move on from there, because there are, some other personnel that could be hired for the job. Obviously some changes need to be made. I don't know if this is the right start, but only time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, it just it baffles me. I mean, I don't know who they're going to get to replace Ray Shero. In my honest opinion, like, who are you going to get? Really, who's floating out there that you really want at this point? You want Lemieux to step in to be GM? You want to be owner and GM? Like, fine, Lemieux, run the team into the ground like all the other owners did in the past. Quite frankly, I don't care. But still, I mean, I can't help but call a stupid mistake when I see it, and this is a stupid mistake.
Yeah.
I'll mark this down. If the Penguins go downhill in the next 3 or 4 years, not that they will, but all right, maybe that a little bit more leash. Let's try 10, 15 years, maybe now 9. I would go with 9.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
9 is a fair one. 9 years. If 9 years later we're looking at a dead last Penguins team, even with Sidney Crosby still on the team in Malkin.
Yeah.
Don't say we didn't blame you for getting rid of Ray Shero right now, And if we're still doing a hockey happy hour, which we probably will be.
We definitely will.
Yeah, because you know what? We're never going anywhere. We're too good to go anywhere.
We're like a fungus. You can't get rid of us.
Yeah. We are the shit stain. But the important thing is, though, is that, what? I wouldn't be surprised if we were right. Just like you basically just shot yourself in the foot by not keeping Ray Shero. Yeah. Because I don't see any other of a better GM, in all honesty. Again, stupid decisions, and I get it because it's of the early playoff exit. Okay, you're going to blame the GM for the early playoff exit. Blame the fucking coach.
Yeah. What have they done? What have they done since 2009? Nothing.
And all the players you've got. You've got a Stanley Cup winning machine here.
Yeah.
And who's to blame for this not working? It's not Ray Shero. All Ray Shero can do is get you the players. Now, I understand when the Flyers promoted and demoted Paul Holmgren. Yes, the reason why we are in the position we are in is because of Paul Holmgren's moves. That is the reason why. Ray Shero's done nothing to cripple this team. I don't get it. What is wrong with you people? If anything, he's tried to make this team stay alive.
Yeah.
And Dan Bylsma can't get his head out of his own fucking ass to make any good decisions.
The only thing I can think of is that Ratio is a loyal guy, and he's staying loyal to the team that he's put together, and obviously it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get to a point where you're up 3-1 in the series, and then in game 5, you just saw that turning point where the whole series just shifted around, and like no matter how many shots that the Penguins fired on Lundqvist, it was just giving him more and more fuel.
Like I said, and to be honest, at the end of the day, the players are the ones to blame for that loss.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I think if Dan Bylsma, he should be thanking his lucky stars he's not fired this year.
Right.
You know? And he really should be. He should be thanking his lucky stars. If I was Dan Bylsma, I would run. Day one of the training camp for the Penguins, I would run everyone's ass over the coals for the very simple fact of you guys had this series won and you acted like a bunch of prima donnas when they started to come back and you got yourselves eliminated. Real simple. So don't give me no shit about how, the Penguins are supposed to be the better team and that the Rangers just kind of rallied around Martin St. Louis' mom dying and everything. No. It's one thing for the team to rally. It's another thing for you to be the team that has to put the skate to the neck. You got to put it through. You didn't do it. You failed to do it again.
Hey, it takes two to tango.
It does.
One team wins it, and another team certainly has lost it.
Yeah, and you guys were the winning team, and you lost it on purpose.
Yeah.
Well, not on purpose, but you guys basically looked like you were going to lose it on purpose.
Yeah, no kidding.
But anyway, we move on to another black and gold team, and another. The other Titan of the East is gone. The one that we pretty much picked to come out of the East. And I changed this midway because I was thinking it, and I was thinking, oh boy, they might actually do this, and they did.
Yeah.
Montreal got rid of Boston. Like, holy crap.
What a shocker. Talk about Cinderella's story. We didn't have Montreal Canadiens getting past the Tampa Bay Lightning.
No, we didn't, and we were wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize to Darren and the land of Montreal. Watching this team come together through the playoffs has been just quite endearing. And one thing that I've noticed about this team is that they're accountable. And that's the biggest asset to any team is to have that law of accountability. That I'll give you a perfect example. I believe it was in Game 5, Plekanec's got an awful penalty which resulted in a Boston Bruins power play goal. And he came back on and just was playing like a determined, raging beast. And he single-handedly won that game, scoring 2 goals late in that game. And it just, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, you may fuck up from time to time, but how are you gonna make it right? How are you going to learn from your failures and move on and be accountable? And this team I thought they were too small to play against the mighty Bruins, and the mighty have fallen, man. It's a great story for hockey, and it's going to be interesting to see Rangers Montreal in the next round.
And the thing is I think Montreal again, I think they fed off of that hatred from the Bruins, and I think that they just allowed the Bruins to get way too out of their comfort zone.
Great point, and it goes to show how Montreal, the polar opposite of Penguins. When Penguins are challenged, they get out of their game and become defunct, so to speak. And Montreal, they were getting, being pushed and prodded by the Bruins, and they got their game on and together,
Yeah, the Bruins tried to bully Montreal in this series, and it didn't work.
No.
It really worked against them in all aspects of the game. The Penguins, they kind of went into their shell, and then they burst out, and then they went back into their shell, and then they fell apart. And then the same thing with the Bruins. The Bruins tried to be like, oh yeah, we're the mighty Bruins. We're going to beat the crap out of you guys, because they absolutely manhandled the Red Wings in the first round. Yeah. And so you're thinking, okay, coming off of that series, the Bruins are looking pretty darn good right now. But again, we didn't give Montreal enough credit. The Montreal Canadiens swept Tampa.
Yeah.
And again, man, that's impressive because Tampa was an offensive machine, and they were in that series. I mean, Tampa was scoring out the ass in that series, but man, Montreal stayed on par with them the whole way.
Yeah.
And then Montreal, going into this series with Boston, the biggest rivalry in hockey, and Montreal just, again, man, they just let that hatred that fuels that Boston likes to fuel their enemies with their hatred, and they did it again. They did it again. And I think Boston is their own worst enemy in this aspect. They always fuel their enemies with their hatred. Boston fuels the Canadians with their hatred, and then the same thing with the Red Sox. They fuel the Yankees with their hatred. It just happens all the time, and they wonder why they lose all the time.
Right.
It just happens.
You know what it does? Playing like that, it takes a lot of energy to play like that.
It does.
And it was an even series, going back and forth, taking one game apiece, in Boston to start off with, one game apiece in Montreal, and you're like, okay, well, advantage Boston still, 2-1 in terms of home ice. And as I predicted last on the show, I go, this is guaranteed going to go 7. Boston's going to win that night at home. They're going to go back to Montreal, where Montreal dominates in that arena. It's a very hard place to play when it comes playoff time. And then came Game 7, and Montreal dominated like they were home. And Boston was just absent. They were tired. You could tell it based on the season as well as them playing in that style of plays. And you saw how thin they became on defense and how scrambly. Like, all 3 goals in that last game were just a perfect example of defensive breakdown. And people, I know what I'm talking about. I'm a Flyers fan. I'm used to seeing defensive breakdown. You know what I mean?
We pretty much all are used to that at this point. And it isn't just this year either. There was plenty of years. But
and I'm not talking about Char. Char stayed true. It was the second and third pairings that really missed the mark. You saw Dougie
Mistletoast.
Mistletoast. Mazar's a great example. Where did he go? He disappeared.
Yeah, he disappeared.
Which was, not too surprising. He's an aging guy. But they had some younger guys like Dougie Hamilton. Right, he started off really red hot in these playoffs, and he continued on the offensive side. But man, that giveaway in Game 7 was just putrid, absolutely putrid.
And I think Boston really only has one person to blame, and that's themselves. Because the Bruins could have taken charge, and they collapsed. They absolutely collapsed. And I think the reason why is, and I say this now because I think both teams are guilty of it, the Penguins and the Bruins have to look and be self-critical, because they have to realize we weren't challenged all year. They weren't. They were the top of the division all year. Nobody made a run at them. Nobody. They didn't have to fight for their spot. They had it handed to them on a silver platter, and they were just waiting for the playoffs to come. They breezed right through the Eastern Conference season. Because the Eastern Conference sucked this year. It absolutely was garbage this year. And now that comes back to bite the bigger teams in the ass in the playoffs, because who had to fight for their spots? The Flyers, the Rangers, the Canadians, the Lightning. All of them had to fight for their spots. The Blue Jackets and the Red Wings had to fight for their spots, but they had to fight the most because they were that close to not making it. And Pittsburgh barely got out of that series with Columbus. You can only do it once. You can't do it twice, really. And they got beat by the Rangers because of it. They were not ready to play against highly competitive teams because they had a breezy and very easy season. That was not tough for them. Boston went through the same thing. They went through a very easy first round where they breezed right through Detroit. They thought, we'll be fine. We got no problems. We'll get through Montreal or Tampa. It won't be hard. They win against Montreal, and they hit a brick wall because Montreal was not intimidated by them. No. Montreal knew how to beat them. Montreal let their hockey do the talking. They didn't let the simple presence of themselves get in their way. And that's the thing. These teams have got to get past themselves if they ever want to see a Stanley Cup again. I mean, nobody's fooled. Nobody's fooled by you guys. Yeah, you guys might be great during the regular season, but what did I say when the playoffs began? Throw all that shit out the window because it don't matter anymore. The playoffs are a completely different story. You lose 4, you're out. It's as simple as that. And they lost 4.
Kind of seems like there's a curse that comes with winning the President's Trophy. And whether that be having to play elite hockey all season long or not being challenged enough, and this is in the case of Boston, all season long and even spilling into the playoffs. And just having that just I don't know, spoiled little brother attitude that Bruins have, from top to bottom on that team. I mean, maybe one exception, I'd say Patrice Bergeron. He's an outstanding player, but the rest of that team are, as we'll get to later on in the show, they got issues, man. They got huge issues.
They do, and I think that Pittsburgh, they're not gonna. From the way they just proved it to myself, they're not looking by themselves. They're still blaming everybody else. Yeah. They're still pointing the fingers at one person or another. It's like, you got to point the finger at yourself.
Right.
You lost that series. Your players lost that series because they didn't get their head out of their ass and play the Rangers the way they're supposed to.
Right.
Same thing with Boston. Now I would give Boston a little bit more credit. I think they will be more self-critical of themselves and realize we fucked up. We should have beaten Montreal in Game 7, and we didn't beat Montreal in Game 7. That's our fault.
Yeah.
So it's not the GM's fault. It's not the coach's fault. It's our fault. I will give Boston a little bit more credit on that because I have seen Boston be more self-critical of themselves. Pittsburgh, no. Pittsburgh's always been the same. Like, we got Crosby, we got Malkin, we're the best fucking team in the NHL. You guys have one cup. One fucking cup, and you think that you're so phenomenal. Guess what? Chicago has 2.
Yeah.
Chicago has 2. Boston has 1. You guys aren't really that different from anybody else.
Yeah.
If LA wins the cup this year, they'll have more than you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's bad.
That is
seriously. Just saying, guys. You guys aren't fooling anybody. You guys aren't that tough.
Yeah.
You guys aren't that scary. We're not intimidated.
The biggest surprise for me in this series, and it's not taking anything away from Carey Price because he's an outstanding goal scorer.
No, not taking anything away from Price. Not taking anything away from Rask.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I am actually taking away something from Rask. He did not play up to the level that I expect him to play in this series. Now, don't get me wrong, still played pretty well. But that's not, Tuukka Rask during the regular season was the best goaltender in the league.
Yeah.
Hands down. And then Carey Price came out and outplayed him. He outplayed him in this series, and that's a big reason. Now, as I said before, Boston's defense got tired, and a goaltender needs the defense in front of him to play well. Any goaltender can be led, and the first 2 goals in Game 7, you couldn't fault Rask for them at all. Just pass that Briere pass right up the middle, right onto the tape. I mean, I'm not talking about that particular goal, but ultimately, Rask got outplayed by Carey Price, and that was another contributor to this series.
And at the end of the day, like I said before, Boston has to be they'll have to be self-critical about themselves, and they'll have to say, it's our fault. We should have played better in front of Rask. And Rask could have played a little bit better than he did. And it's just the way it is. And I think, again, it just came from a very easy first round that they had, and they were not ready for Montreal. Montreal was ready because they absolutely crushed Tampa. And I think Tampa, they only had offense. Their defense and their goaltending really it cost them that series. As Montreal, they were ready for the playoffs. They had a solid defense. They had a solid offense. They had solid goaltending. It absolutely shocked me, and now they proved it once and for all. They beat Boston very well, very handily in Game 7, might I add.
Yeah. Same
thing with the Rangers against Penguins. So, and that's – actually, I want to get into this just a little bit more, just one more bit in depth.
Go for it.
What does this say about the NHL? Because these are 2 of the top premier teams in the NHL, and they're a bunch of prima donna wimps. And I mean that in the most disrespectful way because they don't represent the NHL the way they should represent the NHL.
No, not at all.
There was a time when teams that were elite were the toughest team in the NHL. They were the team to beat, and every year they were either in the conference finals or they were in the Stanley Cup final, and you had to get through them. Now, I understand because the salary cap, the wealth has been spread. It's not like back in the day where you could put 20,000 superstars on a team and go win 40 cups. But let's be honest here. Look at the way that these 2 teams have played over the last 2 years. Pittsburgh choked right against Boston. Boston choked against Chicago in the Stanley Cup final because Chicago was the first team to really step up to the plate against them and really gave them a challenge. Meanwhile, at the same end, Boston now finds themselves eliminated by Montreal because that's the first team that stepped up to them.
Yeah.
New York the same way against Pittsburgh. New York stepped up to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh couldn't handle it.
Right.
So,
and that's what I was going to answer your question to, is that on the positive side, it's showing that there's a greater parity in the NHL now. There's a more even playing field where you're seeing teams that did have to sneak into the playoffs playing well against these mighty juggernauts, and I put air quotes on that, people, juggernauts, to come back and beat these teams.
But what concerns me though is that these teams are representing the NHL.
Right.
And I don't think they should be representing the NHL. Right. And I'll say this, I hate the Rangers with every fiber of my being because I'm a Flyers fan, but I would rather have the Rangers represent the NHL than the Penguins.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have the Canadians represent the NHL back like they used to way back in the day than the Boston Bruins.
That was my point when I told you that. I believe it or not, I was actually rooting for the Rangers in that series, and that was my line of thinking, is that I would rather the Rangers represent the Eastern Conference much more than the Pittsburgh Penguins, because when teams of this nature, Boston and Pittsburgh, represent the NHL, it's shown that the NHL, and this is on the negative side, is a league of prima donnas, and they are the ones that are successful because up from Gary Bettman down to the lowest referee allows it to happen.
They do.
Yeah.
And you know what? Fine. You guys want to let these guys, you want to, pamper their ass. Go ahead. Powder their ass. Suck whatever you want to suck. Yeah. Do whatever you want to do. But guess what? Teams like the Flyers, the Rangers, the Devils, they're going to beat them every year. You want to know why? Because we're better than them. And we know we're better than them.
Yeah.
Because they've been pampered. We haven't been.
Right.
And that makes us stronger than them.
Yes.
And that's why I'm so happy I'm a Flyers fan.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Rangers fans are so prideful in their Rangers hood.
Yeah.
And that's why the Devils fans are so prideful in their. And that's why all three of those teams, there is a mutual respect for each other.
Right.
And the reason why is because all three of those teams, they play the exact same way as each other. They try to grind it out because they don't know any other way.
Yeah.
Because they haven't been pampered. They don't get the calls to go their way.
Definitely.
They don't get to have a superstar go whining and crying to the referee every 5 seconds, Like, that is why you have that mutual respect. That's why it's the same thing. You can have a mutual respect for the Capitals. And even though they got Ovechkin, you don't see Ovechkin crying to the ref every 5 seconds. Yeah. He does put his nose to the grindstone to try and get this team to win.
He just stops playing at times.
Yeah, he just stops playing at times. Yeah. But you get the point. The point is that these teams are representing the NHL. They shouldn't be representing the NHL because they've been proven that they're a joke. They are a joke. Yeah. And the same, the Western Conference teams, they're the real freaking deal.
Yep.
And they've proven it year in and year out.
Indeed.
They are not prima donnas. The Eastern Conference teams are. And it's a sad, sad shame.
Absolutely. Well, let's get to the Western Conference.
All right. Speaking of the Western Conference, let's finally get into them. And, we might as well get into this right now since we got it loaded up. That's right. It's time for the Danger Zone because you want to know? You want to know why? Because two teams are in the Danger Zone, and we already know it's the only game being played tonight, and it should be an epic clash of two Titans in the Western Conference. On one end, the Anaheim Ducks, one-time Stanley Cup champions, against one-time Stanley Cup champions from 2012, the Los Angeles Kings.
Can't believe this is their first matchup ever. It's been an amazing series, and just like Maverick and Goose doing a flyby, man, this series has been intense from Game 1 and now into Game 7. And it's gonna be a barn burner. I mean, I'm proud of the Ducks keeping in this series because the Kings really could have ran away with this series.
They really could have, and the best part is that Anaheim showed their real toughness when they went into L.A. and they went into the Staples Center. It's like, we're going to get both wins from you. And L.A. was like, no, you're not, and then they did.
Yeah.
So, and even with all the goaltending problems that they've had, John Gibson, let's give it up for that guy.
Yeah.
That was a guy who just 2 years ago was a World Junior Gold Medalist for Team USA. That's the biggest highlight of his career.
Yeah.
And now he's helping the Anaheim Ducks possibly only be 4 wins away from a Cup final. Holy shit.
I know.
Like, seriously.
I mean, obviously they're paving the way for this guy because, we're still high on Hiller, but yet this guy's getting a start with Freddie Anderson being hurt. And you know what? His first NHL regular season game, he pitches a shutout. His first playoff NHL game, he pitches a shutout. He's been rock solid all season or all series since he took over. And in the last game was the first soft goal that I figured he could have stopped and quite didn't for that second goal for the Kings. Other than that, you couldn't have asked for anything more from a rookie goaltender here in the NHL playoffs.
And I think the sad part is, sad part is that a guy like Jonas Hiller, you wouldn't think he'd be replaced by it at this point, but he is. But what I think is interesting about this is that earlier in the season when we saw Victor Foss get traded, I thought that was a horrible trade. But it turns out, no. Anaheim is like just got a stockpile of good goalies, you know? It's just like, God damn, man. Like, how many good goalies you got there, man?
Yeah.
Like, seriously, between Gibson and Anderson and, Hiller, it's just like, what? I understand. There's so little room,
Is it that these young goaltenders are that good, or is it Boudreau's lack of confidence in Jonas Hiller?
I think that, I don't know if it's necessarily, I think it might be a combination of both.
Yeah.
And the reason why is Boudreau doesn't have as much confidence in Jonas Hiller because Hiller's been playing like shit. And that obvious, he has been playing like shit. He's been playing good on some games and then absolutely horrible first games in the series will prove it to you on that one. And he turns to these young guys to say, can you get us this win? And I'll give it to John Gibson, who has no experience. Let me put this into perspective. He hasn't played a regular season game. And he gets baptism by fire in the playoffs. And he stepped up to the plate, and he's really given Anaheim something to look at. Like, man, this kid's good, Like, seriously, he's really stepping up to the plate at the most desperate hour. And Anderson too. I mean, Anderson had a little bit of a run through in the regular season, but still, man, he stepped up to the plate when asked.
Yeah,
because he got the start for that series against Dallas.
Yeah.
So it's just like
another rookie too
know?
that they added to the playoff roster, and Smith Pelly coming out with big goal after big goal here that really got Anaheim back in this series. As you said, LA takes the first two in Anaheim. You're thinking, ooh, this is looking bad.
You're in real dangerous territory then, you know.
And then since then, the home team has been true. So does the home team stay true again? Does Anaheim come out of this, or is it Los Angeles moving on for another shot at the Cup?
I'm sticking to my pick. I still think we're going to have a 93 Cup final rematch. I still have to say I think L.A. has revamped themselves in Game 6, and I think we might see what happened between Montreal and Boston.
Yeah.
We might see it happen with L.A. where they just have – L.A. is like a diesel engine.
Yeah.
Once they rev up, they go for a long, long, long time. And I think San Jose is to blame for this because they awoke the sleeping giant when they went up 3-0 in that series.
Yeah.
And then they got crushed after that. They had nothing to counter Los Angeles with. Not that Anaheim hasn't been able to counter Los Angeles. It's just that I just think Los Angeles, man, they've got the players to do it.
They're a deep team.
They got a very deep team. Anaheim has a pretty deep team in their own right, but I don't think as much as Los Angeles. No. So it would come out to L.A. winning on that alone.
Yeah.
And Quick has been phenomenal in this series.
Yeah,
he's
really
back, and he's kicking it high gear, and that's horrible news for every other team in the Western Conference, but he's here. And he's still breathing, and now I think they'll gear up, and they'll come with a big win in Anaheim to finish this series off. My personal thought, I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Anaheim has been a tough team at home. It didn't show up in the first two games of the series. It really did show up in Game 5. I really feel that they're going to have enough to hold on. I generally would not pick against Quick, especially now that he's playing up to the elite level that we've grown accustomed to. But, John Gibson is a phenom. They have plenty of good goal scorers. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the Kings have a deeper line mates, especially when they got Gaborik. That was a huge, huge asset for them, and it's shown true in the series. But, when you have like Jake Muzzin and Trevor Lewis kicking in for the Kings, it goes to show their depth. Oh, man, this is a toss-up. This is the hardest thing for me to pick all year. And I'm going to stay true with Anaheim. I really feel that they have the better captain, in my opinion, Ryan Getzlaf. He knows how to take this team on his shoulders. And between Getzlaf and Corey Perry, and the ageless one, Timo Solani. I just feel that they're going to go all out and move on to the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, all right. I mean, you think that the Finnish Flash is going to keep his dream alive?
Yeah, for now. I mean, I would not be surprised to see the Kings win this, because whenever you have a goaltender like Quick, just like Lundqvist, any game can be stolen.
Yeah, and anything is possible.
Yeah.
And knowing Jonathan Quick, who knows? I mean, we had a great goaltending matchup, not necessarily with the way the series played out, but the way that the series looked on paper. You had a great goaltending matchup between Marty Brodeur and Jonathan Quick, youth and experience, going up against each other, and the Devils-Kings Stanley Cup Final, which ended in 6. And I don't think Brodeur is really to blame for how the Devils played in that series. The Devils are to blame for how they played in that series. They didn't play that good. I mean, don't get me wrong. They played good in Prudential Center, but after they lost both games, that was kind of like the death nail for them. They were like, we're screwed.
Another kid that's impressed me is Jacob Silfverberg in this series, man. He's really come true, and that's why I thought the huge edge for depth would have been for the Kings. But with players like him and Smith Pelly, man, this is arguably been one of the best series. I mean, this has been a playoffs full of great series, whether it was the Kings-Sharks series coming back from 3-0, Rangers-Penguins series coming down from 3-1, that Montreal-Boston series that wrapped up, and now this series. It has been a very entertaining play. No playoff series has been a dud.
No playoff series has been, and it's been fun to watch the playoffs, to see just like anybody can win these. There's been one series that you can call, and that was the Detroit-Boston one. That's it.
Right.
That's the only series we've been able to call.
It was still entertaining, though.
Yeah, because Detroit won the first game.
Yeah.
So that was even interesting. They won that 1-0, and then eventually, then Boston won that OT game in Game 4, and that ended everything for Detroit.
Certainly.
But it's going to be interesting to see how this game plays out. I think what we're going to see is, obviously Anaheim being home, they're going to get the early push, and they're going to try and just score early and put the Kings really at a deficit, which really isn't secure. And the Kings I think they'll probably hold off. I think Quick will do a good job, and I think their defense will hold out against the Ducks' early push, and I think the Kings will eventually I'm pretty sure the Kings will probably score first, because they just always find a way to shut everybody up. And, this Kings team, man, they love making the road their home. They really love doing it.
Yeah,
and when they play at home, they play like shit. It makes no sense, you know? It's just like when they're on the road, they love it, man. They enjoy it. It's just so much fun for them.
And not to ignore old friend Jeff Carter, man. He's been playing like a young buck in this series, too. He's been all over the ice, skating to those open spots, really causing a lot of great scoring chances, too. If he comes out and plays like he did in the first 2 games of this series, then, Kings have gotten it. It's locked up. I say he doesn't. I say Anaheim moves on. Maybe that's a little bit of devil's advocate, but it's a true coin flip.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, we're right. We're both right. Yeah. No, that's just how it is. We're both right.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's
the great way to look at it.
Yeah, we're both right. We don't know who's going to win.
Yeah.
So, all right, we move on. And time to talk about a series that ended in the Western Conference, being the Minnesota-Chicago series. We called that Chicago was going to win.
Yeah.
I thought Chicago was going to win sooner than they did. I thought Chicago was going to win in 5 like they did last year. But I think Minnesota made a big jump, leaps and bounds from where they were last year, because they really were competitive against Chicago. They beat Colorado, which I didn't think they were going to do.
Right.
I literally did not think. I didn't think they were going to beat Colorado at all.
I knew they'd give them fits, but I did not see them beating them moving on.
And
but
they beat them in 7. Strangely enough, they beat them in Pepsi Center, and I thought, that shocks me, And then
it must be that connection with Patrick Waugh, because they beat them in 7 games in his last season as a goaltender.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even put that 2 and 2 together.
Right.
But along with that, Minnesota going up against Chicago, they really gave Chicago fits when they got to Minnesota. Minnesota shut them out and did a great job just getting back into the series. Eventually, though, Chicago, they won in the United Center, which we thought was going to happen. And then This game, though, this series had to end in OT, so let's not take anything away from Minnesota. That game had to be ended by Patrick Kane in the very first minute of OT.
The first loss that Minnesota took at home, the first loss that Minnesota took at home in St. Paul. Yeah.
So that's impressive to see that Minnesota didn't take a loss at home until that fateful game.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, Minnesota, they can get eliminated here, and they've got absolutely nothing to be ashamed of.
Not at
They
all.
have got nothing to be ashamed of.
They've showed how much they've grown from last season. Certainly have added scoring depth. Magnus Granlund. Yeah, outstanding player, and this was his coming out party. Obviously Parise is.
He
great.
came out.
Yeah, right out of the closet.
I'm just joking.
Yeah.
Pop, sorry, Granlund. I apologize. That's a mean joke.
Well, we have
our
our first homosexual athlete be drafted by the NFL. Maybe
Michael Sam.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know what? Let's throw that out there. Congratulations to Michael Sam being the very first homosexual to be in the NFL, and I just hope that we can look past that and more judge him for the football that he plays. I feel sorry that he's on the St. Louis Rams, but good luck to him and everything that he does. Hopefully he has a good run in his career, and hopefully he gets traded to a better team.
Yeah.
But
hey, the Rams might be more improved, man. They had a great draft this year. Trey Mason, who got overlooked by a lot of teams, I think that was the steal of the draft. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. But anyway, back to what we were saying with Granlund and the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, it just really we always knew that they were a strong defensive team. Now they've gotten good goal scoring. They still have a goaltender situation to nail down, and I feel that they will once they get healthy in that department.
Yeah, I think.
But hey, Brizgalov played admirably, man. I mean, he gave them what they needed: the solid goaltending. When it was called upon, because that team just doesn't give up many scoring chances or shots. And he played steady. I mean, maybe there's one or two times where I was like, oh, that's the old Brizgalov that I know. But other than that.
And I think it harks back to the way he played in Phoenix. And the reason why is because he had that strong defensive core. And Henry brought that up in the last show. That strong defensive core that he played with in Phoenix really helped him in this series against Chicago and the series in Colorado because – yes, Brizgalov will give up the fluky goals. He's not the guy who can steal you a game. Maybe. But you have to play so well in front of him defensively.
Yeah,
the Flyers were not that team. Our defense has not been that way for quite some time. Thank God we got Steve Mason now. But the important thing is, though, is that Minnesota they worked with what they had.
Yeah.
When life hands you lemons, you make lemonade, and that's basically what we've seen from Minnesota.
Yeah.
When life hands you defense, you play defensively. Yeah. And that's how they've been playing.
And I mean, we already praised the Blackhawks, but let me praise them a little bit more. I mean, when you have this type of scoring depth from Patrick Kane to Jonathan Toews, and both contributing and not just being there on the ice a la Sidney Crosby. And it resulted, and that's how the series wrapped up. Patrick Kane with another overtime game winner, as we sadly remember. And even like players, like they get the best out of their players. You have an aging player like Chris Versteeg chipping in with a great first period goal in the last game.
Former Flyer.
Yeah, another former Flyer, exactly.
He wasn't even really a Flyer. He was on the Flyers for a season. Yeah. But anyway.
By proxy.
Yeah, by proxy. But anyway, but the truth is there, and the proof's in the pudding. Chicago is a real deal dynasty organization, and I'll say that now because they got 2 cups. And I know that might seem like a bit of a crazy thing to say that they're a dynasty. I don't really think so, because in this league, with the way the cap is, and the way that it's a wet nurse, and the way the NHL enforces it now, in all complete honesty, I think that with the way they've been playing, they should be considered a dynasty. They got 2 cups. They've been to 2 Stanley Cup Finals. They're batting 1,000 in the Stanley Cup Finals, which is impressive in my book.
Yeah.
When you go batting 1,000 in this period Stanley Cup Finals, that's impressive.
I mean, it's the toughest tournament in all of sports, in my opinion. And then you're going to come and play your strongest games when they matter the most in the championship round. And to do it, not 2 years in a row, but 2 seasons, relatively close together. That's impressive.
And let's not blame, the whole idea of, hey, let's look at the situation as it is. look at the way that Chicago played against Detroit last year. Detroit had them down 3-1.
Yeah.
And they came back down 3-1. And that was when you started to really see the chink in the armor in Detroit's, long history of being in the playoffs. That was when you first started to see Detroit starting to go on that downtrodden. But Chicago, man, they just breathed new life in the middle of that series, and they got going. Yeah. So the point is that's Chicago's the real effing deal. You know? I mean, I can't stress that enough. If you're going to face Chicago, bring your fucking A game. Yeah. That's the way I look at it,
And another, to compare them again to the Pittsburgh Penguins, look at the difference in the front office. Look in the difference behind the bench. Joel Quenneville is arguably the best coach in hockey history,
and he's got the proof.
Yeah, actually, one of the only former players and head coaches that played in 800+ games as a player and a head coach. The man knows the game. He gets the best out of his players, and it's not always the stars on that team coming through, albeit they are consistently coming through. This just rearing that supportive cast, and that that's why I'm really surprised that the Penguins didn't fire Bylsma.
I am. I'm really surprised because I look at Bylsma, I don't even see what he does that's so important. And a lot of times when you hear people talk to him, like Pierre Maguire's talking to him, that jackass, and he's talking to from one jackass to another, and Pierre is talking to Dan Bylsma. Dan Bylsma, he looks like he's lost. He looks like he's just like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
When you listen to him and you listen to Craig Berube knows what he's got to do.
Yeah.
When you listen to Dan Bylsma, he's like, I don't know what the fuck to do. The same thing with Joe Quenneville. Joe Quenneville knows what he's got to do. Lindy Ruff knows what he's got to do. Ken Hitchcock knows what he has to do. All these guys who are proven hockey coaches, well, maybe not Berube, was only his first season, but the other ones that I mentioned, proven hockey coaches, and they have shown the world that it is like, hey, we're playing like shit, but don't worry, I'm going to smack the shit out of them. I'm going to make them play better. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And these coaches do that. They're not afraid to tongue lash their players and let them know that, hey, you got to play better. If you don't play better, I'm putting my foot in your ass. It's as simple as that. Play better,
Yeah.
And it's proven it time and time again. And again, the proof's in the pudding. Look at St. Louis and how well they've been playing. Look at Chicago and everything that they've done, winning the cup twice, and just keep on doing well.
Yeah.
And Lindy Ruff basically pulling the Dallas Stars from the depths of hell and bringing them back to life, literally.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I said, there's not much else you could say about it. The proof is right there, you know?
And to come as strong as they did in two tight 2-1 games in Game 5 and Game 6 in this series just shows that Blackhawks can play well in a 8-7 game, an 8-2 game, or a 2-1 game. They're very versatile in that respects.
Yeah, they are, and that's what I think really beat St. Louis at the end of the day, and I think that also wound up getting them past Minnesota.
Right.
And again, Minnesota's still building. St. Louis really has no excuse, but Minnesota, they have a reason why they got eliminated. They're still building themselves up. They barely got into the playoffs as it is, and they made a great run for getting in as a wild card.
Yeah.
And eliminating the number one team in the division in Colorado. That's impressive.
Yeah.
And then moving on to the next round, I still say that they made some good strides, leaps and bounds in this year's playoff, and a lot of respect earned.
Who would have known if St. Louis held on strong towards the end of the season and didn't get all those injuries and retained that number one seed, how it all would have worked out? It would have had, you probably would have had it still would have worked out. No, because St. Louis would have played whom? They would have played.
St. Louis would have played Minnesota.
They would have played Minnesota first round and would have just dominated them out the water, and then Chicago, Colorado, man, that would have been a great series too, and then pass on. But it worked out the way it worked out, and Minnesota, true, has a lot to build on from a great, great season and now postseason.
Okay. And you know what? I think that, we've got a fair assessment. I think we've already got a season preview pretty much just booked up between both of us, where we're just like, that's pretty much what Minnesota can use that as their driving force for next year when they wake up and it's the next season, it's time for training camp, they could say, hey, we made it this far.
Right.
We've been taking our steps up that ladder. We got to the first round last year, we got beat. Got to the next round, we got beat. Yes, by the same team, but guess what? That's our goal. To one day be able to face that team in the playoffs and beat them. That's their goal.
Right.
And good goal to aim for, in my opinion. So, we've gotten our roundup through the playoffs, and we've got pretty much steady look at what we've got so far. And before we pretty much send the show out, because we're only going to do an hour session today, another time constraint today, so therefore we will be doing the hour long. Quick little hint to all the fans. This is a quick preview of what we'll be doing during the off season. We will still be around in the off season, so don't worry if you were going to panic and say, what are they going to do for the off season? Don't worry, we have it all taken care of. We'll be doing an hour long show. We'll be doing it, not routinely, but we'll be doing it, routinely, that'd be crazy. We'll be doing it, every Friday still, and we'll be doing it weekly, and we'll be doing an hour-long show just to keep everybody kind of in their eyes, and we'll be doing a little bit of coverage. I think we'll do World Cup coverage for the soccer,
that'd be fun.
And just cover that tournament, because that's the big tournament that's coming in the summer for sports, and just to keep us busy and just to keep you guys a little bit interested in what we're doing. We'll scratch out the hockey happy hour for the off season. We'll put the soccer happy hour for the off season.
That'd be funny, right?
But anyway,
well, the'll be a lot to go on.
Yeah, there'll be a lot.
There'll be the draft, certainly any off-season acquisitions and moves, firings, more hirings.
And we might do a 2-hour special for the draft only because there's
cool.
going to be a lot to cover for the draft. So we might do that for that. But that's all stuff to take care of
maybe,
off the mic.
And maybe, folks, you might even be able to see the men behind the mics coming up soon.
Possibly. But that's all in due time.
Yes.
But more importantly, let us get into this quick little segment.
Liar's penalty on number 8, Dave Schultz. 2 minutes for hooking, 2 minutes for roughing, 5 minutes for fighting, and a 10-minute misconduct.
Baby, how long will you keep me in the penalty box? Baby, I'm wrong, but it's lonely in the penalty box. I know I broke the
Well,
rule.
obviously, if anybody wasn't listening, it is the penalty box time, and we got some interesting people that we want to put into the penalty box here. I know Rob's got the guy he wants to go to. I'm going to throw my guy in first.
Go for it, man.
The guy I want to throw in is Mario Lemieux.
Oh, yeah?
For making the stupid decision of firing Ray Shero. I think you should be in the penalty box for stupidity. It's as simple as that. You get a 2-minute minor for... Actually, no, you get a game misconduct for stupidity because, in my opinion, I think you could cripple your team with changing GMs at this time because you are at a focal point, my friend.
They lost a big-time asset, as we covered in the beginning of the show, and I had a feeling you might have went with Lemieux for the penalty box because I saw how ramped up you were about this move, and I agree with you, partner. I don't know what he's thinking. I really would have fired the coach rather than the GM.
Yeah, and it just seemed like that was more logical, Like, I don't know about you, but if I was Lemieux, I would have fired Dan Bylsma. I mean, I understand maybe the coaches are sucking him off, but I mean, you gotta be like, hey, gotta make a decision at some point,
Yeah.
And Dan Bylsma can't be there forever.
Is it his inexperience as an owner coming up here?
I don't know if it's his inexperience as an owner. I think it might be his inexperience of not really... I don't even think he understands that his team is a bunch of prima donnas because he didn't play on a prima donna team.
Right.
That's the thing. He played on a tough Penguins team that could handle themselves, which is why I do have respect for that Penguins team. I don't have respect for this one, So it's just like...
And Lemieux himself didn't play like that. I mean, he got the protection because he was an elite player, but he did not play like a prima donna.
No, he didn't back down. I mean, there was a couple of times where he dropped the gloves and he went after somebody because he was tired of getting attacked. He was tired of not getting called because of him being the star, and that happens.
And the only time you see Crosby toss the gloves is when he knows that there's not going to be a fight. That he just wants to look tough and I'm standing up for my teammates.
You're not standing up for anybody.
Well, we're not ragging on Crosby though. We're ragging on
Lemieux because it's just like, you know what, Lemieux. I don't understand why you did it. You got to go into the box for stupidity. Sorry, but that's just the way I call it, like I see it. Rob, send it over to you. Who you got in the box?
All right. Well, I'm giving him a game misconduct because that's how just fucked up this was, man. And you know me, I don't curse that much, but this was ridiculous. And I'm talking about Milan Lucic of the Boston Bruins. It is a time-honored tradition to shake hands in this league after a series. You put away all the bullshit that went on during the season, all the bad blood, and you shake hands like men and celebrate a game that has been in existence for well over 100 years, going into the next century now. And if any of you don't know what I'm speaking of, at the end of the Boston-Montreal series, as they were shaking hands, Lucic went up to, I believe it was Weiss, yes, Montreal forward Dale Weiss, and made threats on his life, man. And shook his hand and pulled him in. And I know it was a fiery series. I know there was a lot of bad blood going back and forth, squirting water bottles, yada yada. This is a time-honored tradition that needs to be honored. If you don't want to shake the other team's hand, then don't get in the line. You want to get rough with someone, take it outside. Address the player on it at another time. It was a horrible way, and to this very minute, Lucic his quote is saying, "I'm not sorry for what I did, and I would do it again." And it just represents the whole organization being one big punk. And that's what the Boston Bruins are. And and it wasn't even just with Weiss. He had a couple pretty stern handshakes where you could tell it was, not you can have a stern handshake, but this was trying to rip someone's hand off. I don't know. I'm besides myself. There's no room for this in the NHL.
I understand where you're coming from. I mean, I'm not a hockey purist because I like fighting and, rough play and stuff like that. But here's the thing. I know when it's time to understand that, guess what? They beat us. It's over. You can't do anything about what just happened. If you're going to let your temper get the better of you at that moment, that shows a lack of discipline. It shows a lack of character. Mm-hmm. And it speaks less about you than it does them.
Yeah.
And the fact that he put the Bruins organization on the chopping block almost, I think the Bruins, in my opinion, should very much so look at Milan Lucic and say, if you do that again, you're out of here.
Yeah.
And, I mean, don't get me wrong, Milan Lucic contributes a lot. But here's the thing. If I was running that organization, I would be the first one to call him on his cell phone and tell him that's bullshit. You don't do that. You do that again, I don't care how great of a player you is, I'm getting the GM to trade your ass.
Yeah.
Because that is, I don't appreciate that coming down on my organization because you just gave the Bruins a bad name.
Absolutely. It makes the whole organization from top to bottom look bad. And as I said during our assessment of the series, they lack discipline. And it shows from players like Marchand down to Lucic. And, he was quoted as saying, "I'm a guy that plays on emotion, and this is a game of emotions." And this is the way he was justifying it. I couldn't agree with you anymore. But where was it while the clock was still running? Where is that fire and tenacity while the clock is still running? You didn't show it then, and now the series is over, and you're going to show it now? Too little, too late, buddy.
You're going to show your intensity while you're going down the line shaking hands? Is that really your excuse? Is that your best excuse that you could throw at us? Can't you just be a man and admit I let my temper flare up and that's and that's what happened? I didn't mean to, but that's what happened. Can you just admit that you're wrong? Can anybody admit that they're freaking wrong anymore these days?
No.
I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you. If I fucked up, I'll tell you right now I fucked up. Because I don't feel good about trying to sell you bullshit.
Right.
I don't like that. I don't like bullshitting people. Right. I'd like being more honest with you than not. If I gotta lie to you, it's because I'm trying to protect you. It's not because I'm trying to be an asshole,
right.
But anytime I ever do something wrong, I will let you know I did something wrong, and I will apologize for it, so that way we can all walk away square. Milan Lucic, again, the way he's coming up with excuses, the way he's trying to play this off, just like, you're really trying to justify what you did. You can't justify being a bad sportsman.
No.
You can't justify letting your temper get the better of you. You just got to admit it for what it is. And if that's who you really are, then you're just as bad as Sean Avery.
Right.
You know?
Oh, absolutely. Great comparison, partner. And you know what? If I were Dale Weiss, might be a bit of a bitch move, but I'd bring this guy. I'd submit charges on this man. You know, just like, you know, you could be accused of assault, you know, with a deadly weapon when you whack someone in the head with a stick. Making death threats is pretty serious. That's a pretty serious nature. And I wouldn't let him slide. I really would not let him slide.
Well, I think the NHL shouldn't let him slide.
Yeah.
And if the NHL don't do anything about this, then it goes to show that this is a league that loves to cater to the prima donnas. That would prove to me the most ever that Gary Bettman would not bring this up to the Boston organization and say, hey, you got to do something about this. That can't happen again.
Right.
If Bettman, in all his wonderful wisdom, decided not to do anything about it, wouldn't be the first time because he's as dumb as the freaking doornail. And, you know, it wouldn't surprise me, but again, that's bad. That's really bad. I mean, it's already bad enough that people think you have a big ego about yourself. When you think that, fine. It's one thing to be judged as arrogant and as a prick. It's another thing to be judged as an unsportsman, to be judged as a nasty SOB, and to be judged as somebody who will make a death threat on you for the simple fact of you lost. You lost and you're going to try and kill somebody over it?
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's been plenty of days where I've seen the Flyers eliminated by the Devils. Have you ever wished death upon Brodeur? Maybe when I was having my temper flared, yeah. But not in reality. I'm not really wanting him to get killed. That's horrible. No. You know, you say things when you're upset. I understand where that comes from.
Right.
But you can't, you just got to admit it, you know?
When you're making this kind of money as a professional athlete, you got to act like a professional.
Yeah.
If you feel like your emotions are getting the best of you, don't get in line. Don't get in line. Don't get in line.
Yeah, either that or get in line, shake the hands, and do it quick. Go back to the locker room and just have your shit fit there.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and keep it between you and your team. And then your coach can handle it, you know?
Right.
And that's the way it's got to be. You can't let that go to the other side. Because, again, that makes the Boston organization look bad. And that shows that you're very selfish.
Right.
You don't take into account everybody else that is being around you. You don't take into account what the man that was your captain who busted his ass, Char, you're not taking him into account. You're not taking into account Rask, who did everything he could. You're not taking into account the players that busted their ass in this series and understand that, guess what, we lost in 7. Right. There's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
And you didn't take that into account, and you didn't take your organization into account neither. The people that gave you that job, basically.
Yeah.
So, again, if I was the GM or if I was the owner, I'd call up the GM and I say right now, if he ever does that again, and you bring this to his attention, or I'll bring it to his attention, he ever does that again, we're trading him.
Yeah.
I don't care what we got to do to get rid of him, but I don't want him in my organization giving me a bad name.
Yeah.
There's a reason why the Rangers don't have Sean Avery anymore.
Right.
You know?
If this story was about Brad Marchand, would not have been surprised. Would not have been surprised whatsoever. But even he is a better sport than this, and I'm surprised, Mr. Lucic. Like I didn't know him as this, and this has given not only his organization a bad name, but himself a bad name.
It certainly has. And now, good luck for him, being if he is to be released by the Bruins. Now, I don't think he'll be released over this, but if he was to be traded, everybody's going to take into account what he did. Mm-hmm. Everybody's going to take into account, is he going to be that way? And the coaches are all going to basically keep him on a very short leash from now on for that very simple reason, you know?
Yeah. You might see some coaches be in favor of a player playing with such ferocity, not shaking hands.
Yeah.
You know, and dishonoring a time-honored tradition.
It is. It's just a shame because he's pissing on not only Montreal's organization, he's pissing on the Bruins organization, and he pissed on the NHL when he did that. And he pissed on the cup, like you said off mic.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yep.
He's 100% you're right on that one.
Yep.
So definitely belongs in the game misconduct. And maybe I was a little bit too much of a prejudge on Mario Lemieux for giving him a misconduct. Maybe I should have just given him a 5-minute misconduct for stupidity. But you're right, for the 10-minute major, he deserved that one for just pure unsportsmanlike and absolute shitting on the organization.
Yep.
So we move on from that, and quick little updates on what's going on in the Flyer world. Matt Reed scored a pair of goals for Team Canada in the World Championship. So Matt Reed showing a little bit of life. He put a lot of effort into the Rangers series. He only managed to get one goal, though, which is a shame. But he put a lot of hard work and effort into that series, so I can't blame him. A lot of block shots. There's only so much you can do about that.
Yeah.
The scores today for the World Championship of Hockey, which is going on, is the USA got a big win on Kazakhstan in a preliminary Group B matchup. And another preliminary Group B matchup, Finland defeated Switzerland 3-2. And then in Group A, both of those preliminary matchups, Canada absolutely crushed Italy 6-1. And then Sweden defeated Slovakia 3-1. So there's a little roundup of the scores in the IIHF World Championships. And quick little showing of the standings in the group pools. Right now in Group B, Russia leads the way with a 500 record at 4 wins and 4 losses with 12 points. Latvia is number 2 with 4 and 3. So Latvia, man, they're still showing a lot of life ever since those Olympics.
They got a good program
they
there.
Do. They do.
I heard big thing about Ovechkin playing pretty well for Team Russia there.
Well, then tell you, them Washington fans are kicking themselves right now.
They really are.
But Finland is 5-2 right now in third, and the 5-2-1, which is the reason why they're not leading the standings, because they have one overtime. They have 2 losses. I apologize. They have 2 losses, and therefore that is why they are not in the lead. Oh, I apologize. I actually round this off wrong. Russia has a 4-0 record. Latvia has a 3-1 record, and Finland has a 2-1-2 record, and USA has a 2-1-2 record, and they are in 4th place. And this is how the record is: it's wins, overtime losses, and losses. Belarus has 2 wins. No OT wins, no OT losses, but 2 losses, so they're at 500. Germany is 6th with 1 win, 1 OTW, no OTLs, and 2 losses. Switzerland has 1 win, no OTWs, 1 OTL, 3 losses, and Kazakhstan has no wins, no OTWs, 2 OTLs, and 3 losses. So that's your Group B standings for the IIHF World title. And Group A is Finland leading Switzerland. Not Switzerland. Sweden! Jesus! Can I get this right at some point?
You always get it right. Just the wrong words came out at the time.
Thank you, Rob. But anyway, Sweden is got 4 wins, 1 OTW, no OTLs, no losses. They're undefeated. Canada is 2nd with 4 wins, no OTWs, 1 OTL. And the Czech Republic have 1 win, 1 overtime win, and 1 OTL and 1 loss. So they are completely at 500. 1-1-1-1. So there's an interesting little tidbit for you. Norway is got 2 wins, no OTWs, no OTLs, and 2 losses. France is 5th. That's right, France is 5th.
Wow.
With 1 win, 1 OTW,
Oui.
no OTLs, and 2 losses. Slovakia is 6th. That is atrocious. They have 1 win, no OTWs, 1 OTL, and 3 losses. Denmark has 1 win, no OTWs, no OTLs, and 3 losses. And Italy has 1 win, and they're in 8th. Italy has 1 win, no OTWs, no OTLs, and 4 regulation losses. So there's your little roundup of the group standings for the IIHF World Championship in Belarus this year.
Belarus.
So quick little tidbit there for you. Other Flyers news going around is the injury updates that have been on through. Grossman is just had surgery.
Yep.
And so did Steve Downey. He had to get it on his ear from taking that shot. And as well as Ty McGinn. Ty McGinn has had his ankle problem, and he's got to get that fixed. So both of them, all 3 of them, are scheduled to be back for training camp. because they'll have the offseason to recover. Hopefully they'll be back. But there is a bit of iffiness with Steve Downey because he got hit in the head. So there's a bit of that iffiness if he's possible he might have post-concussion symptoms. Now, that's not determined yet, but there is a concern over it. So hopefully that is not the case.
And this isn't so much in the injury department, but Flyers defenseman Eric Gustafsson will not be returning next year to the Philadelphia Flyers as he signed a deal with the KHL.
So Eric Gustafsson leaving to go to Russia. Hopefully you love vodka.
Yeah.
And we
Avangard
will see you
Omsk.
then. Avangard Omsk. So
Yeah.
that should be interesting to see if that survives on him.
I'll tell you, that league is just snipering off great players in this league.
Well, yeah, that and prima donnas. So,
Yeah.
i.e. Ilya Kovalchuk.
Right.
Anyway, we move on. And, well, out of all those tidbits, one last thing I want to mention. Zach Konopka of the Buffalo Sabres was
Yeah.
suspended for 20 games due to a substance abuse violation.
Is this hockey or baseball we're talking about here? No.
I mean, I'm surprised. Really. I mean, I just didn't see that happening.
You know, quite often, and we saw this with what's his name for Sweden in the Olympics.
Forsberg?
No, not for you. No, but basically, where often what you'll see is it's a medication being taken by one of these players, and they're not aware that it has a certain chemical component that shows up on a drug test. I wouldn't be surprised if they haven't announced what exactly it is at this time. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was something along that nature.
Yeah, and the funny part is with that is that I just thinking like, what is their drug policy? Strangely enough, and I don't even think they do have a policy that they enforce. I think it's more like we will suspend you for a period of time if you do violate that policy. To be completely honest with you, because 20 games just seems so random. You know, to me, it just seems very random that they're going to suspend him for 20 games for that. But either way, they suspended Carlos Ruiz for almost that a long time when he got called for the PED, for the PED in baseball. So, I mean, who knows? But either way, that's a quick little snub. I don't think he'll be missing much anyway because he is on the Buffalo Sabres. So, I mean, I can't imagine them improving anytime soon. And I think the Sabres yes, I was trying to think of this before, and I think the Sabres got the first pick for the draft this year. I do believe.
Have to, right?
Yeah, I do believe they have it on the random draw because they had the second most. Oh no, I'm wrong. Buffalo did have the most of those little tennis balls for the random drawing.
Right.
But Florida got it. Florida had the second most. So
Right.
Florida's got the number one pick. Buffalo's got the second pick.
Nicholas Backstrom. That's who I was thinking of. Remember,
Nicholas Backstrom.
He got disqualified right before the gold medal game. That's what I was talking about. And he had taken an allergy medicine of all things.
But you know what? I think in all honesty, I think that was an honest mistake from Backstrom and from the Team Sweden for not knowing that.
Right.
I think if they suspended Konopka for 20 games from the NHL, I think he might have done something on purpose.
Yeah.
You know,
a little more intentionality there.
I think maybe he was doing a little steroids, possibly. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who really knows? Because Konopka was a big guy. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if he might be juicing to get even bigger.
Yeah.
Because Buffalo, quite frankly, they're not going to be making the playoffs anytime soon. So, but either way, that will.
You are so tough on the Sabres, man. I love it.
Many years of watching the Sabres and the Flyers facing off makes me hate the Buffalo Sabres.
Indeed.
So, you know, hey, you know, those were not easy series in any stretch of the imagination. So
Yeah, no
I still hate Dominic Hasek all these years later. And I'm so happy when he got scored on by that no goal by Brett Hull. I'm still happy. I'm so happy that it happened to Buffalo. I'll be honest with you. I was actually happy. So happy when Buffalo lost that Stanley Cup final. I was jumping up and down, cheering. I'm like, yay! Hey, they got scored on illegally. I couldn't help but laugh. I was laughing. I was so happy. Even if there was a Buffalo fan next to me crying, I still probably would have been laughing my ass off because I just hate the Sabres so much.
Yep.
But anyway, we move on. Time to wrap up the Hockey Happy Hour. Hope you enjoyed this quick little hour edition. Like I said, this will be the way we have it during the off season, but we will be back to 2 hours. We're going to aim to have it at 2 hours next week. Bit of a rough time with some schedules going along, you know, but it happens.
We're hardworking in the radio biz. That's how it goes.
Also, Henry was not able to make it in today, in case anybody didn't know. We love you, Henry. We hope to have you back next week.
See you next week, brother.
We'll see you next week, brother. And we move on to hopefully seeing him in the next show.
Yes.
All right, so last call, gentlemen. Hope you guys loved the show. We enjoyed it, and we hope you guys loved listening to it. So keep it with the hockey and keep watching, because the Stanley Cup is only right around the corner. It's so close. It's almost there. It's almost within reach.
I can smell it.
You can smell it. You can smell all the piss and vinegar that's been in that thing. It's now time to see who can win that cup soon.
And champagne. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's fun. Yeah. All right. Here is a little Master of Puppets to send you guys out with from Metallica. Hope to see you next time on the Hockey Happy Hour. From Rob the Povia and Matt Ciancutti right here behind the boards. We'll see you guys next time on the Hockey Happy Hour.